when students from different conflict zones learn collaboratively, it helps to promote dialogue, foster friendships, and break down barriers. I've seen that in many places in the world. It's good that you didn't have a dinner or a lunch, because I remember in the first part of my life, I was a television journalist, and when we created the V4, that time it was V3, so the presidents of Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary met in a Hungarian castle, and we were supposed to create a concert for them, and it was all live. And of course, we introduced the music of György Kurtág. You may know him, fantastic contemporary composer. But it was after lunch, and actually we couldn't give one close-up of the first row with all the great presidents sitting, because, you know, for the music they were all nicely sleeping, and sometimes when the music became very loud, then sort of they woke up and they didn't know where they were. So it's good that it's not after lunch or dinner, it's only coffee break. So it is a great honor and privilege and pleasure for me always to be here. Actually, with friends, it's a very sort of friendly and family atmosphere always in the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy. In 1999, when actually Mark Donfried funded the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, the UN General Assembly adopted by Resolution 53/243 the Declaration and Program of Action on a Culture of Peace, which serves as the universal mandate for the international community, particularly the UN system, to promote a culture of peace and non-violence that benefits all of humanity, including the future generations. The declaration came about as a result of a long-held and cherished concept contained within the Constitution of UNESCO, that since wars begin in the minds of man, it is in the minds of man that the defenses of peace must be constructed. The declaration embraces the principle that peace is not merely the absence of conflict, as we heard today many times, but also requires a positive, dynamic, participatory. I knew already when I wrote it, it will be difficult. So then when you take part in the process, kind of process, in which dialogue is encouraged and conflicts are resolved in a spirit of mutual understanding and cooperation. I always say at least not to misunderstand each other. Our deliberations on peace and ways to foster it will remain abstract, of course, musing if we don't apply them to the real life, to the real situations, and people on the ground if we don't try to make a real difference. Sometimes we forget that despite the periods of conflicts, people have lived together for ages, mixing with and learning from each other, exchanging views, experiences, adopting various elements of other cultures. The task before us is to identify those cultural phenomena that have historically glued the communities of different backgrounds together in harmonious coexistence. For me, the cultural unifying factors can be found, for example, in literature, oral and written traditions, artistic expressions, sites of common cultural heritage, even the examples of gastronomy. Understanding the indigenous forces and processes that promote mutual acceptance and cooperation is the first step towards relearning how to focus on the positive factors, how to build trust. This is especially relevant in places where peace had broken down. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and fellow advocates for peace. The UN celebrates its 80th birthday this year. A perfect year to reflect, to face, to change, to reform, to evaluate. Sir Georg Solti, the great 20th century Hungarian conductor who had to leave Hungary because he was Jewish, and he fled to Switzerland just before his family was perished. He was asked by the UN Secretary General Boutros Boutros-Ghali to do something big for the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. He told him, Maestro, you can do anything, just we have to celebrate, that we created the UN. So the Maestro invited musicians from more than 40 orchestras. He put them together, and they created together the Orchestra for Peace 40 years ago. He said, in a very harsh way to the world, that we would like to show the leaders of the world, politicians, what really means when we talk about international collaboration. He said, all my life I have grown up in war, in revolution, both fascist and communist, and it taught me passionately to believe in peace. I wanted to prove with the musicians of this orchestra that we have to look at each other, we have to listen to each other, we have to create harmony together, and we can do it. The principle for this, of course, can be emphasized by the words of another great Hungarian, the composer Béla Bartók, who I would say was a UN man even before the UN was set up. He wrote in the 1930s, my guiding philosophy has always been the idea of different nations uniting into brotherhood in spite of all the wars and hostility. I have tried to serve the aims of this idea as best as I can in my music. So for that reason, I don't shrink away from any influences. So what do these two strong examples, which of course have been followed by so many musicians and artists, show? The need of openness, of course, and collaboration. So using dialogue to promote peace and the rapprochement of cultures, as well as supporting reconciliation and other measures that impart tolerance and mutual understanding we know, seem too often nowadays old-fashioned and sentimental, but still I would not give up this concept. We have to start again and again every day to stick to it. And how we can fulfill our big joint dream? How can we honor each other homeland, language, culture, participating together to make the world a better place for future generations, as we say? If traditional diplomacy is seen as hard, culture diplomacy is soft. But the so-called soft power is not so soft after all, because it channels the wider connective and human values. If traditional hard diplomacy is seen as prose, I would say the soft culture diplomacy is poetry. The American poet Carlos Williams wrote, "It is difficult to get news from poems, yet men die miserably every day from the lack of what is found there." He reminds us that poetry may not be practical and straightforward, but its less tangible attributes can lead to unexpected revelations that enhance our lives. The poetry of diplomacy allows us to embrace the subconscious and our deepest, most hidden thoughts and feelings. It makes full use of intuition, lateral thinking, and creativity, which in our troubled times can lead to surprising breakthroughs where traditional methods have failed. I would still argue to handle our political differences through dialogue and use also the art of culture diplomacy. I remember the very first time I spoke at the Security Council in New York, I started to talk about the importance of dialogue and the importance of culture diplomacy. That was a total revelation in the Security Council. Because I believe that the dialogos is a Greek compound word widely mistranslated and wrongly understood because of confusion between the duo and the dia. It does not mean a conversation between two people or two groups, but an acceptance by two participants or more that they will compare and contrast their respective arguments to the very end. Dialogue is accordingly a perilous enterprise, for it implies a risk that either participant may find his or her argument transformed and thus their very identity put to the test. Dialogue is not designed to lead to a definite conclusion. It retains, even when this is not apparent, a latent conversational quality, and this shines through its written forum. I have to tell you, I believe it is so important because many times, as an ambassador and diplomat all over the world, I met many of my colleagues, and we talked about the importance of dialogue. I won't tell you which country I'm talking about, but they told me, oh yeah, we believe in dialogue. And I said, so what is dialogue for you? And the ambassador told me, well, I talk, and you listen. So this is not what we need in neither form of diplomacy. You will agree with me that we have to renew also our commitment to intercultural dialogue, keeping in our hearts and minds the verses of Rumi. I love this. He says, half of me comes from here, half from everywhere. Half of me comes from the pearls of the sea, half from distant shores. Yes, multilateral diplomacy and culture diplomacy needs time. You plant, you wait, you sow the seeds, wait and trim, then harvest at some point. In multilateralism, you invest into networking, relationships, trust, and you build a base you can rely on. You need patience with international institutions and with culture diplomacy. Gardening takes longer than bargaining quick business deals. But you need to educate young people to dialogue. While politicians are in a cul-de-sac, people continue to communicate through music and arts and science and international media. For that reason, diversity in thoughts, attitudes, or cultures can be seen as an inspiration for cooperation rather than a burden. Is the fundamental yet often overlooked element in the quest for peace, namely education, still an option here today? Yes, I argue, yes. In a region marked by conflict and division, education has the power to bridge gaps, foster understanding, and cultivate a future where coexistence is possible. It is, of course, very important to provide training for teachers on how to handle sensitive topics related to conflict and promote peace in their classrooms. Support for educators can enhance their ability to create a positive learning environment. Education is not merely about imparting knowledge. It is a vital tool for empowerment, social cohesion, and conflict resolution. A well-rounded education encourages critical thinking and dialogue, encouraging students to question, analyze, and engage in constructive conversations about their realities can lead to innovative solutions to long-standing issues. Education empowers individuals to challenge extremist views and promotes peaceful discourses. And education can dismantle stereotypes, promote empathy, and should also equip young leaders with the skills necessary to advocate for peace. By providing students with opportunities for leadership and civic engagement, we can nurture a generation that is committed to diplomacy, negotiation, and nonviolent conflict solution. I had two professions, actually. Half of my life I was a journalist, the second half I was a diplomat. I am actually both at the same time right now. I'm a free person at the moment. But I must say, I feel very often that both professions are diminishing. Everybody believes that he or she is a journalist. This is what we can see in social media. But I was assured that the cycle will go on and the people will realize that they need real critical journalism. I wait for that. And I also believe that diplomacy is not making politics. Politicians are doing politics, but we diplomats, wherever we go, we have to build the bridges. Whatever means we are using, whether it's soft or hard, it's culture diplomacy or science or business relations. When students from different conflict zones learn collaboratively, it helps to promote dialogue, foster friendships, and break down barriers. I've seen that in many places in the world. At UNESCO, of course, we have got plenty of programs. I just would like to mention one, what I'm not doing also in Hungary, is called the Art Camp, in which we are inviting young artists or artist students from tormented areas to work together, to create together. And the beauty of culture diplomacy using art as a form of bridge building is the creating process in which we are all participating. Incorporating peace education into the curriculum helps students learn about conflict resolution, of course, but also about human rights and the importance of coexistence. I believe to leverage technology. I had a great conversation last night with Prince Boris, and I was thinking, yeah, we have to use also these technologies as backgrounds and possibilities and online platforms to facilitate virtual exchanges, which can allow students to learn from each other and share their experiences even when they can't meet in person. We can use that possibility as well for diplomacy. I also advocate to integrate mental health support into educational programs. That's why I also advocate, we have a program at Columbia University with a friend of mine who is a psychoanalyst and me as a diplomat, arguing that today diplomacy can be successful only if diplomats will be educated also for the knowledge of psychology. While the potential of education for peace is immense, it is essential to acknowledge the challenges as well, Your Excellencies, because in conflict zones, access to quality education is often hindered. Addressing barriers such as displacement, economic hardship, and security concerns is crucial to ensuring that all children have the opportunity to learn. And of course, political tension can permeate educational institutions, making it challenging to foster an environment of openness and dialogue. That's why I argue, and I would like to, well, at the moment we don't have too many people here in the UN, but I have been always advocating putting enough more money and investment for preventive diplomacy. The problem in the UN system that we wait until something bad happens and then we try to manage the conflict. Actually, conflict prevention should be a very important form and supported form in diplomacy. So, by promoting understanding, fostering critical thinking, and encouraging civic engagement, education can help pave the way for a more peaceful future, I believe. And that is why only diplomatic solution is the way. I'm looking forward to hearing about it more. Thank you very much.